Whitney English. It is a joy to have you on For Real. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, friends. I'm happy to be here with you today.
It's so fun to be with you. We have hung out in real life a couple times, right?
We have.
At the
We
Oaks,
have.
maybe, and maybe in Canada.
Yep. Couple
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, I feel like it, but we haven't been able to have our own moment. So this is very fun for me. Um, Top of the hour, I want to talk to you about, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I'm pretty sure we have been grocery shopping together a lot of times. Did I ever tell you that?
Mm. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
This is where I fangirl. It's awkward for people, so it's okay if you cover your face. Many, many times you were in the grocery store with me because I'm pretty darn sure that there was a Day Designer
Uh-huh.
printable that I got
Uh-huh.
from you years ago, your company Day
Uh-huh.
Designer, before you sold it. I
Uh-huh.
used that thing until it was dead. I photocopied it. I got photocopies of this printable. That's how excited I was, and printed in bulk. You helped me. Is this true? Am I making this up?
Is it certain columns? If it,
Yes.
yes. And the reason I made that is because I laid out the list like the aisles of the
The
grocery store where
store.
we stopped.
I know. That's why I loved it. Little
Isn't
did
that
I know
crazy?
in my photocopying life that I would meet you and love you. And you had
Oh.
these long legs of all these ways that you have helped me over the years. But I loved your planners. I mean, I really did. If we could see, if my camera went higher, you would see a stack that I have kept because I love them so
Mm-hmm.
much. So
Uh-huh.
here's my question. I'm now reading this. I've just finished
Mm-hmm.
yesterday your beautiful new book called Organize First, Decorate Second. The sub is How to Go from Clutter to Creativity. And here is this shocking development. You, my printable and planner ninja, my productivity guru, you struggle with clutter like the rest of us mortals. You are one of us. I'm shocked. So I would love for you to dispel this myth that professional designers, productivity people, the gurus are naturally just having it all together and naturally neat.
Well, I think that they are all I think I'm the only one out there who is
You're
I
the
don't
only one.
I really do, and that might be a fallacy and a myth that that might be a lie that I'm believing, but if necessity is the mother of invention, then I didn't create planners and printables so I was organized. I created them because I was struggling with organization and was looking for a
Uh-huh.
tool and a solution and have the creativity to and the know-how to solve that problem. So it was actually it the creation of all those productivity tools and things came out of like just a need to
Yeah.
be that way instead of actually being that way. I think it would almost be boring to have it all figured out because then there wouldn't be any challenge.
Mm.
I don't know. The challenge is part of the struggle is part of the story, right?
Yeah,
You take conflict out and all of a sudden you have the most boring narrative ever, right?
totally.
Um, so yeah, that's how that came about.
Well, I love this because I think your battle cry, which is that clutter inhibits creativity, that idea that we actually are
Mhm.
less creative if we have clutter. And you talk about, all sorts of clutter. You're a designer, so there's a starting point with your rooms, the spaces we
Mhm.
inhabit, that is a problem. But I think clutter in general inhibits creativity. That battle cry is more compelling because you didn't have this naturally. This didn't just come to you. I actually do know folks who are organizers professionally and do that. They are 100% very organized people from the start. And that's part of their
Mhm.
gifting to help other people become organized. But secretly, I love
Mhm.
your way because it's boots on the ground, right? It's
Mhm.
dirt in our toes, the people who aren't naturally bent that way. So talk to me, convince me. I am convinced, but convince our listeners.
Mhm.
Why does clutter inhibit creativity specifically? And how have you seen that work itself out in your own life?
Great question. I mean, first of all, I think there's like the scientific answer,
Yeah, hit
that
me. Yeah.
our eyes need a place to rest visually when we walk into a room. And the more chaotic the space, we're just going to sort of take on the feeling of our environment. A long time ago, I noticed that I always cleaned out my purse whenever I was traveling.
Oh, interesting.
Like you walk into a hotel room and all of a
Yeah,
sudden you
right.
don't have anything else to do. So you
Right.
clean out your purse.
Mhm.
Versus when I'm at home, I walk in the door and I instantly see 12 things to do. There's the scrapbook. I need a photograph for the friend whose house burned down in January. There is the stack of American Express bill. I'm looking around my room as I say this. There's I decluttered a closet last week. There's the wrapping paper bin that needs to go to the Goodwill. Yeah, I mean, there are things to do and projects, even if it is just as simple as carrying it to the and and the minimalist will say, get rid of it
Mm,
because you have better things to do in your life. But I think that there's something about that I really value about caring for things.
mm.
And I value resourcefulness. And so, I have been with organizational experts and gurus and people at conferences and things. And I've heard, and actually I'll tell you a story. One time there was this goodie bag. I was staying with a, a person whose name I will not give you, will not. Um, but let's just say you could qualify her as an organizational guru that
Okay.
we're talking about.
Okay.
And and some other conference attendees had put together these goodie bags to
Mhm.
send to rooms of different influencers and things like that. So she was the recipient of one of these, and it was charming. It was one of those gifts you get at a conference with like cookies in a jar and a cute little gift bag. And I had 3 small kids at home, and I was thinking, "Oh, they would love that. What a sweet gift from that sweet person who put all this together and brought it to the conference and made sure it was delivered to the right room and all that." And I saw she tore through the bag, threw it all away, dumps the cookies in the trash and said, "Well,
Oh.
that woman must have more money than sense." And I was like, "How ungrateful."
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I wanted to walk out of that room and go find the woman that had given her the gift and been like, "You don't know who you don't know who you're trying to impress, and I don't think you really want to impress her."
Right. Also, do you
Um,
have extra cookies? Because I would like the cookies, even if she did. I'm sure you were like, "Can you give one to me?"
right. No,
Wow.
100% was.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about people in the world who didn't have cookies. And so there's something about um I do love quality things. I am there's something about the minimalism trend that can really quickly go toward that can actually get kind of cluttered. It can get
Mm,
kind of cheap and plasticky
mm,
and it can be totally organized and not have meaning. And I feel like the decorating side of things helps me steward the things that I have
mm.
and while organizing them at the same time, I guess.
Right.
That's one way to say it.
Yeah. No, I think what you're hitting on is your predisposition to love beautiful things and to be unapologetic for that. And that sometimes the folks who talk about decluttering, maybe beauty goes way far down the list because beauty sometimes is a mess. So I really love how you merge that. You talk about both the organizational piece of loving where you are and then also the decor. And it's very helpful to have those be twins, but you don't forget the beauty. You don't forget that actually you really love that chipped teacup. And it's okay that it
I
doesn't
do.
match anything else. You use the word patina. And I love that
Yes.
word too. Just the idea that we've used these things and loved these things and that they become more beautiful with
Right.
you. But you also definitely make the case that if you are serving your stuff, then this is not a good idea. That your stuff shouldn't serve. You shouldn't serve your stuff. You shouldn't
Right.
serve items in your house. They should
Right.
serve you. And so
Hmm.
you talk at one point about how you loathe. First of all, thank you for using the word loathe.
I do like that word too. Yes.
It's good. I think I'll use it more
Uh-huh.
often.
Uh-huh.
Um, You say you loathe the lists of questions that most
Mhm.
organizing books give. So the first half of your book is centered on this organizational idea that we're going to take stock first before we turn to
Mhm.
the decor in a room. And I haven't seen that before in a book that you tackle both. Usually one talks about one, you get your beauty
Right.
from another spot. So I
Mhm.
love it. I really appreciate that. But you talk about how lots of times the organizational people have these fairly complicated lists of how to figure out what to keep and what to discard. So I want you to tell us a better way, but first tell me how you came to the loathing. Because
How it came
loathing's
to
a
the loading.
strong word. I mean, that's a pretty fierce
Right.
sentence. Why the strong
Right.
feelings, Whitney?
Well, I think that those strong feelings are good things to write
Oh,
books
for
about, right?
sure. For sure.
So but our brain is a muscle, you and I know this, and it fatigues. We get
Yes.
tired. And those questions, if I have to ask myself 16 questions when I'm decluttering the closet about every single thing I touch, I
Death.
will burn out. Yeah.
Never. Yes.
I've hired professional organizers in the past. I always learn something. That's one thing that even if you are going to write a book about it, be a guru about it, you don't have to have it all figured out. Like let's
Right.
let's dispel that myth again. And so I've reached out to ask people for help at decorators and organizers at different times in my life. And it's always a great opportunity to
Mm.
learn from someone else and their tips and tricks. And I was in a garage 15 years ago cleaning it out, and I had hired she was a nurse part-time, and then would help people come in and declutter. And I got really frustrated cleaning out a file cabinet. And she very wisely recognized my fatigue
Yeah.
and said, "Okay, let's stop for today. We're good. Like your brain is tired." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's and that was I do in my book talk about Marie Kondo and the idea of asking yourself, does this spark joy? And the first, I can't remember now if it's the introduction or the chapter
Yeah. It's
one,
right off the top.
talking,
Yep.
yeah, right off the top, talking about asking yourself if it sparks joy. Because
Hmm.
finally I was like, that's one question I can ask. And I don't even have to ask myself. I can kind of just sort of intuitively be like, yes or no, but it really does come down to, is this thing still serving me? And then to take it a step further, I also try not to contribute to landfills. I mean,
Hmm.
and so the idea of looking at an item as a lifespan. So if it's done serving me, that doesn't mean that its service is done, but can we pass it on? Is there a friend that needs a gift wrap storage bag? You know, because we take it to the Goodwill, or just something. We try to give things another life as part of the stewardship instead of just being like, let's set this at the curb and call it done.
Right. So maybe giving yourself a little space and grace in those projects to not um, let the file cabinet stop you dead in your tracks, but just pause. I think a lot of folks can identify with what you're talking about because we tackle a project, and that nurse organizer lady was very wise
Hmm.
to look at your stunned face and say, okay, it's 5 o'clock in your heart
Hmm.
and you need to stop. There's no, I think what that says to us is that that makes sense that this is not just a logistical problem. It's an emotional experience to go through a bunch of stuff, and it costs you to do it.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. It really does. I haven't thought about it that way, but there is a price to pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I ignore the biggest ones because I know, and actually, paper for me, you mentioned a file cabinet. Oh, heavenly days. I'm married to a
Hmm.
wonderful man who, like you said in your book so kindly, you said about yourself that you don't use the word hoarder, you use the word collector. I am married to a collector. And
Uh-huh.
he collects paper and will say things like, don't you think I should just keep these notes from sophomore biology class? And I have to gently say, well, now that we have the interweb, I feel you will go there first and not to our basement. But that is actually what I want to ask you next,
Okay.
because lots of folks can identify with either being themselves the person who tilts towards chaos or towards collecting, or sharing a home with someone like that. And there are people listening right now who are just about to push pause and are thinking, listen, I get it. I've tried the things. All I get is guilt and shame because I try to tame the chaos. And then in 25 minutes or in one day, especially if you live with other people, it's over.
Mhm.
So reframe for us the possibilities of not having a naturally museum order kind of bent, right? I mean, you write about your mom. It sounds like your mom
Mhm.
naturally really loves order. She really loves organization. Um,
Mhm.
if you aren't like that, for the listeners who aren't like that, or if you have a very creative or even neuroatypical,
Mhm.
neurodivergent brain, I'm grateful you're writing into this space because I don't think it's wise for us just to say either, well, I can't, or it's a lost cause. You talk about how those things actually can be strengths and beautiful things. So talk to me about that. I love this line in your book. You say we need garden paths as much as we need superhighways.
Mhm.
So talk to us
Mhm.
about how we can reframe for ourselves the possibilities of having different bents.
That's a great question. I do think that there is one thing that surprised me about having conversations about people who've read the book is they've said you're so willing to talk about your ADHD diagnosis. And when I started writing the book, I didn't think about leaving that out. It wasn't even my editors were like, unless you've been diagnosed, do not mention this. And I was like, here's the diagnosis. Like,
Right.
I think in circles instead of straight lines. And it
Mm-hmm.
really, so projects get started and then they float. But I think part of dealing with the problem is admitting, just you have to face it and own it if you're going to try to work around it or overcome it. And calling it out, I just have never been an ostrich. It's like, why stick my head in the sand about the way God created me? I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
is what it is. I
Yes.
have gifts to offer the world. I'm just going to have to figure out different ways to employ them.
That's good.
And I want to honor him with those gifts. And so I do think that part of it is learning to trust
Mm,
the process.
mm,
I feel like even though that can be cliche. The other thing that I think is really important to mention, and this has been a theme in my life this year, is the idea of tension.
mm,
And I'm learning to recognize that the tension is the gift. Where this came
mm.
from was earlier this year, I was like, wait a second. I was just thinking theologically, which is probably something I do more often than not, but don't talk very much about. I was like, did God create sin? So I asked ChatGPT. ChatGPT is like, no, God did not create sin, but God created free will. I'm like, great answer. Thank you. Uh,
So you asked ChatGPT. That's hilarious. It sounds like ChatGPT has a theological interest.
I it is amazing how much it has been able to unpack theologically for me.
Yeah.
That that this idea that when God gave us agency and free will and the ability to make choices, that probably entertained him quite a bit. That his creation was down there doing its own thing. And he knew that the byproduct of that was going to be this tension, this spectrum between good and bad. As humans, we try to make things black and white. And
Hmm.
I have this ability to just live in the gray, like live in the process, live in the messy middle. So much so that it does help for me to have people who come along and say, okay, we're good. Let's press publish now. Let's take away the paintbrush. You have written enough. You have drawn enough. You have painted enough. Like we
Got
can
it.
actually put this out to the world and see. And that's terrifying to
Mm,
be a creative and to have to live within the constraints of execution.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
That it doesn't do me any good to create if I don't put it out there in the world. I'm not using my gifts if I am not pressing, so
Hmm.
it takes an immense amount of faith to do that. And I think by recognizing that tension, I am learning that that's a sign, that's a good sign.
Mm,
Like keep moving into
mm.
the tension and using that constraint to inspire more creativity.
So, for the listener who is dealing with or who has ADHD or someone in their house does, if they're tackling a project, let's say you mentioned you decluttered a closet this week. Do you
Mhm.
approach that differently because of the way your brain works? And
Mhm.
have you learned any tips or kind of about yourself, okay, this is how this will go better
Mhm.
because of how
Yes,
your brain works?
I the shorter the better. Yes,
Okay.
that's a great question because I recognize I will peter out and
Mhm.
I will get tired before cleanup time,
Yes.
and so the cleanup doesn't happen. So
Okay.
I've learned to recognize because I want to keep working on it. It is fun to take things from a state of disorder to order,
Right.
whether it's a closet, a book, a painting. I mean, to go from nothing to something can feel very satisfying. So
Totally.
I want to stay in that creative part, but finishing things requires, yeah, you're scrunching up your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you have to clean up. But I mean, there's a right way to finish.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn to recognize that if I get too tired, if I get to that frustrated, fatigued spot before I've started cleaning up, that I need to clean up. And so that's almost more like an intuitive body
Mm,
thing. Like you
mm.
just kind of have to be like, I've been working on this for so long and I know that, and it might be an actual constraint. Like I have to go pick up my kids from school at 3 o'clock or, whatever. But
Mm.
leaning into that and just really making sure that I finish well
Mhm.
has helped me.
That seems like grace to your own darn self. Knowing how your own rhythm, your own cadence, your own way of approaching a moment or a project or a life isn't
Mhm.
something you're supposed to beat out of yourself. It's supposed to be great information going in,
Yeah.
right? I bet
That
knowing that shifts how you approach the project or how you did 10 years ago before you knew this about yourself or 20 years ago.
that's a really good point because I do think that that's another theme that you see in organization books is this idea of giving yourself grace. And for me, giving myself grace looks like leaning into that tension and that constraint versus so I think just to clarify, and I would encourage listeners to do this too, define what giving yourself grace means. Grace does not mean staying in my pajamas all day and not getting up and moving things forward. Grace means leaning into the tension of the to-do list, the things that I need to do, and getting as far as I can with the energy that I have, and then not beating myself up,
Mhm.
but not just
Bowing
lazing
out.
around. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yes, totally. Yes. You actually there are several points in this book um where you give very specific, just what you just did right there, kind of put on paper. You have links to different printables, which I love, to instead of being overwhelmed in the moment of I know this has to change, I'm not quite sure how to go there. You are very good at making this, taking out the zoom lens on the camera and saying, okay, let's look at what you have, what you need, how you feel in this space, or how you feel. I mean, you just do a very good job of putting language to something that could really quickly become overwhelming. And you talk in the book, and I've heard you talk about this elsewhere, about style. And you are a professional designer, Whitney. You've gone to Parsons, you've done all the things. I am Kim in Iowa. So when you say to me, what's your decorating style? What's your decor style? That is a big word for a lot of people. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed before we start, right? I've seen the things you talk about this, but in 10 easy steps, you'll know your complete style and you can just go straight to
Right.
Pottery Barn. Um, Talk to us about that because it's easy to get that word and get stuck there. Well, I don't know my
Right.
style. So what do we do?
Right. Well, the magazine, Glamour magazine, take the quiz and find out about like that you're talking about. I mean, it's trying to provide a solution, right? From a marketing standpoint. It's taking a problem and trying to package it into an
10
easy
easy
answer
steps.
that
Yes.
right, that sells on the newsstand. But we both know life doesn't work like that. And I really like the idea of a storied style. And this is where my love of writing and my love of style sort of combine. this idea of how can we take the concept of narrative and apply that to our home. And it's really easy because in the simplest way, you just look around you and count the stories. You know, tell me about the vase of flowers on your, sitting on the book behind you. Or tell me about one of those photos. That's a story.
Mm-hmm.
And when we walk into spaces that have those stories, they start to resonate with us.
Mm.
I believe in a very deep, intuitive way that we don't even recognize sometimes. Jesus talked in parables. I mean, how that resonates with you in a way that you can't always put your finger on. There's a reason why. And I hope in the book I give people, I do talk about one, I call it old, new, borrowed, blue and green. And it's just a way to help people kind of figure out how to dissect their environment so that they can put it back together. They can, if you can pinpoint what you like about a space. And I would also just say, like, look for the stories. And there are some other tips in the book. I talk about starter style, and we've all made expensive mistakes and tried to decorate around a sofa that just didn't work. And I would love to save people from that pain if possible, because it's awful. So there's other stuff in the book about that, but it really is about, figuring out what speaks to you, and then you can, you could be really analytical about it. I actually just had a call because I design textiles and sell them on Spoonflower, and people can message me and ask for color changes. And what I've started doing is scheduling Zoom calls. They have to schedule them on Calendly, but it puts it on my calendar and I can screen share and we can just get it done. Well, today's call, the girl had a picture of her living room. And so we really kind of started talking about, she was asking me some design questions, and you could tell that she had really worked hard at understanding design principles and elements. And once you understand that stuff, it doesn't matter if you're creative or not. You are creative. I don't want to hear that excuse. I believe everyone is creative, but there really is a way to, the more you learn, the easier it's going to get. And the more intuitive it'll get too, I think.
It's great. Oh, how lovely to have a Zoom call when you help people make sense of their order in life and chaos. That's great. It's awesome. Let me ask you rapid fire decor troubleshooting questions. Okay.
Hey.
There are common mistakes that we make. And I'd love to hear some hacks, okay, for these particular rooms. So when I'm going to give you 4 different rooms, this is really fun. It's like a game show, only no one wins anything. So I'm going to say the name of the room and just freestyle it, either a common mistake that people make that they shouldn't, or a hack that many times you say, oh yeah, this is off, but I know how to fix it. Okay, you ready? Does that sound fun to you, or do you want to leave the conversation?
It sounds fun. I'm a little bit scared, but I think
don't be scared.
The price is right. Like,
remember that we know nothing, so you can do whatever you want. Okay, first room, kitchen. Any common mistakes or a hack that you can give our listeners?
Hack would be put things where you use them. So our pot holders, we have one of those ovens that the door open out instead of down.
Okay.
The pot holders are on the left. If they were on the right, we would have to reach around the door too. So, I mean, you could even just stand in front of your stove or stand in front of your kitchen sink and put your hand out and be like, what do I need to touch from right here?
Good. Great hack. You're a pro at this.
Cool.
Okay.
Yes, one down.
Bathroom. 1 down, 3 to go. Bathroom. Hack, common mistake, something to make our lives easier. Anything you have.
Got it. Took me a second. Most bathrooms have one light over the mirror. It's terrible. If you can do anything in your bathroom at all, it would be, I would tell you, put a vertical mirror and then put a sconce on each side of that mirror at 66 inches high.
66 from the floor.
Right. Okay. 66 from the floor. I talk a little bit about lighting in the book because it really does make a huge difference. Don't buy daylight light bulbs. They are not daylight bulbs. No. They are
Target. They are Target fluorescence high school cafeteria.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've all made that mistake where we're like, oh, I want it to look like daylight. No,
No, we don't.
stop. Light bulb people, stop calling it that because it confuses the rest of us. And
Light
if we could
bulb
get it
people. All you
light
light
bulb
bulb
people,
people who are
are you
listening.
listening?
That's very smart. You need to call GE and Sylvania and tell them, I don't need to know the lumens. Just show me, is this a natural filter?
Right.
Will I
Right.
want my photo taken in this light? And
Right.
if not, we need to do it in a
Right.
commercial kitchen. Okay, I love
Right.
that.
Take it off the shelf. Yeah.
So lighting matters, 66 inches off the floor, sconces, vertical
Right.
mirror. Very good. Okay,
Yeah.
entryway or mudroom area? You have great stuff to say about this in the book. So I mean, you're
Well,
living this.
thank you.
That's really something that we
Mm-hmm.
have to say. You are living this life. Okay. You have three
Mm-hmm.
children, correct? I've met them. So I
Yep.
hope there's three.
Yep.
Three
Mm-hmm.
kids. You've got a drop zone. You have people coming in and out of your house and dirty
Mm-hmm.
and grubby. And I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there too. And so when you say mudroom, we hear mudroom because you have
Mm-hmm.
one and you use it. So tell us,
Yes.
common mistake or a hack?
Don't try to put things where they're not landing.
Okay.
So where the backpacks land, you have got to figure out. In fact, our current drop zone space is not even finished. We moved in during 2020 and we haven't had the money to finish it. The beauty of not having the money to finish it is that I can look at that space and tell you exactly where the hooks are supposed to go because that's where the backpacks have
Yes.
landed. And I do the same thing with terminology, like making sure that, and my husband and I have been known to don different personas. Mrs. Doubtfire, Mary Poppins are quite common to try to communicate things to the kids about, and they're 15, 14, and 12 now, so older than when you met them, but they're like, Mom, why are you? And I'm like, you're not going to forget, will you? And so, but we have this one area of our house that when we moved, it's stepped down into the living room and we call it the dance floor.
Mm.
We're not going to try to rename it.
No,
It's the dance
that'll
floor,
stick. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a room that our TV is in and it's painted green, floor to bottom. We call it the green room. It's
Totally.
and so, but it was kind of funny the other day because I gave a kid the job of tidying up the drop zone and they go, "What's the drop zone?" I was like, "Okay, here we go." Like, darling child, this is the drop zone. They're like, "Oh my word." Like, you're not going to forget that it's the drop zone. So that's my hack is just where things land. My husband always puts his keys on the kitchen counter and I'm just like right around the corner, like literally you could stand in the same spot where he drops them on the counter and I could reach around and like put them on a hook. That's it. You just need to keep the step between where it lands and where it needs to have a home.
You mentioned if you don't know where the drop zone is, just don't do anything for a week.
Right.
Watch where things land. That's your drop zone. That's very,
Right.
very practical. Okay,
Yeah.
last one. Main bedroom. A space often neglected. I like tidiness. So I'm about, I like the way I like to have a tidy room, but in terms of decor, that's last on the list usually because I don't know, there are other places where we're hanging out all the time. So talk to me about that. Main bedroom, a hack or a common mistake or some way that we can make this a better situation.
I'll give you two. One of them is make sure your nightstand is the same height as your mattress.
Okay. It's good.
Have you heard that before?
No, but that makes intuitive sense to me because we don't want to be leaning out of bed to get a cup of water or reaching on high.
Or up or down, just right there. And then the other thing I would say about the bedroom is soothing color, calm. I really need sort of a soothing. I've had bedrooms that are maybe just neutral, just like tan or beige walls or something. And there's something about cool tones, whether it's blue or blue-green. It's this idea of a body of water that just can really, I think it makes a difference for me. So that's the other tip I would give.
Awesome. You win that entire game. I will send you a nightstand that's appropriately
a link to a podcast to share.
Yes, you get that for free. Okay,
Yay!
one quick last word, and then I have a final question I ask all of my guests. The last word, you, Whitney, have built and run companies. You have designed products, rooms, schedules, spaces. You seem to love bringing order from chaos. You
Mhm.
are a chaos untangler. You can get a tattoo
Mhm.
with that. So for the
Mm.
listener who feels tangled up, either, by a space that's messy or uninspiring, or maybe a dream that feels too big, or
Mm.
any other area where chaos or overwhelm feels just too huge to tackle, what
Mhm.
would you say to that person about how to move out of the chaos and
Mhm.
into better things? You've done it in a lot of different ways with a lot of different
Mhm.
spaces and companies and products and experiences. So I feel like you're the expert in this. So what would you say to that person?
So, the way I with needle pointing a couple of years ago, still do, but I have this ball of yarn that was, it had ended up in the bottom of the bag, and at one point in time, it had been nice and neat and tidy and rolled and all that, but it wasn't anymore, but so anything wadded up in a knot is not gonna be useful. I was sitting on the floor and started to untangle it. I just started to, like, take it apart and, like, spread it out. Was like, "This is the best metaphor for life that I've come across." And then a couple years later, I was actually reading something, I don't remember where, but somebody else was using they were at it was some maybe it was a needlepoint magazine, I have no idea. But they were like, "How do you untangle a ball of yarn? You just start spreading it out.
Hmm.
You just have to find a big flat surface and start to pull apart the threads and, like, put one over here and move one over here." And then pretty soon it starts to be a circle. And what seemed to be a big jumble and a big mess all of a sudden starts to be one smooth, round, connected, everything is connected, um, loop. So I would say that the answer to that question is you're just gonna have to take it apart. You just need to I really would. I would just say get analytical about it, be like, "Okay, um, does this angle matter to this circumstance, to this issue? Okay, it doesn't. Okay, I'm gonna set it over here."
Hmm.
And I think sometimes I do this too, but especially with big dreams, I just want to go do it all.
Mhm.
And when in reality, like they have to find a focus, and sometimes it just takes conscious effort for me to do that.
Mhm.
I don't do it intuitively. I have to think about it.
Fantastic. Very good advice. Last question is the book nerd question.
Ooh.
Yes. So you've mentioned several that you are a reader. You've mentioned that several
Mhm.
times. So is there a book that you would recommend to our listeners? Maybe it's a book that you're excited about reading that is on your perfectly positioned nightstand.
Mhm. But
Or maybe, or is there a book that you read years ago that you recommend often?
any book, not we're
Any
not
book?
going for a
Nope.
specific topic.
Nope,
Any.
because I think that readers are interesting. And it's very interesting when I ask this question. Oftentimes, the recommendation is so far off the beaten path of what we've already talked about, which is awesome because
Mhm.
I think we're all very curious people. So, wide open.
I am very curious. I read a book in college called A Severe Mercy. Have
Such a
you read
great
it?
book. Yes, I just,
By Sheldon Finucane?
yes, it's a beautiful book.
Yeah,
That's a great recommendation. Why does that stick
and
with
it
you, do you
just it
think?
I was going through a really hard time in life when I read it, and I cared very deeply for someone who I don't think understood a lot of things. I think they would understand now, and I remember I'll just tell you a story because it kinda did come full circle. I remember getting on my knees and just praying that he would come to understand God's love and really just being like, Lord, I would do anything, It doesn't really even matter what I want in this situation. The whole idea of loving someone is wanting the best for them, even if it's not you. And I maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but it's just like, what can I sacrifice? Like, what can I offer you, Lord, that would, I don't know, help him come to this deeper understanding of who you are and what you've done for him. And I realized a couple of years ago, my husband and I went and started a church in a very small rural part of Oklahoma where a lot of people had second homes. I talk about this place in the book. And we are no longer there. We don't have any feet on the grounds or anything out there. No investment out there. But we helped start this church. And after we left, this guy and his wife bought a house out there and they started going to that church. And I was like, if you're looking for a severe mercy, like that's where it is.
Mm.
Also in that book, I think C.S. Lewis does distilled in the knock and Christians never have to say goodbye.
Mm.
And there are a few people in this world that like, I just don't think I've ever finished a conversation with. One of them is my best friend who lives in California. Her house burned down in January. I don't think I've known her since 5th grade. I don't think we've ever finished a conversation.
Hmm.
And I just am so excited that we have the opportunity to spend eternity together and Christians never have to say goodbye. So I love that from that book too.
That's beautiful. Well, this is just delightful. Thank you, Whitney, for
Thank
joining
you.
me. Thank you for writing a lovely book that I'm holding for all of our YouTubers. Just so
Thank you.
beautiful. I'm so proud of you. So excited for you and for how this book is going to help a lot of people bring beauty out of chaos. So well done. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks. Thanks, friends.